So I wrote a paper, submitted to the Journal of Sedimentary Petrology. And they sent it out for reviews and they came back and they said it's good and they published it. I was still a student. I already got a paper published and it was getting international attention and so on. That gave me the encouragement and the confidence to move forward.
This is Climate Debrief brought to you by the CO2 Coalition. I'm Angela Wheeler. Dr. Shanmugam was born in Surguji, India, and immigrated to the U.S. in 1970. He earned his MS from Ohio University and PhD in geology from the University of Tennessee in 1978. A naturalized U.S. citizen since 1990, he has lived in Texas with his wife Jean since 1976. His career includes 22 years at Mobile Research and Development in Dallas, with advisory roles over the years with other major firms. Since 2000, Dr. Shanmugam has served as adjunct professor at the University of Texas at Arlington. Dr. Shanmugam is a pragmatic, iconoclastic, deep-water sedimentologist renowned for challenging paradigms. Today, we will discuss with Dr. Shanmugam a presentation he created for Climate Debrief entitled Climate Data Models, Hypocrisy, Rational Skeptics, AI, and the Truth. We're honored to have you lend your expertise, Dr. Shanmugam.
Thank you, Angela.
Can you start by telling us about your doctoral work on the Sevier Shale Basin in East Tennessee? How did your research on stratigraphy, sedimentology, and tectonics shape your approach to broader environmental and geological issues like CO2?
This is the slide of Professor Kenneth Walker at University of Tennessee. He was my PhD dissertation supervisor. He received his PhD from Yale University. He was a rigorous, no-nonsense, field-oriented geologist. That's where I learned my training in field geology. Although he was a well-known carbonate sedimentologist, he is very well versed in all aspects of science. And also I learned how to write research proposal, how to deal with publications and so on. So I was very fortunate to have him as my PhD supervisor. In 1974, I was looking for a PhD dissertation topic. Walker had a large NSF grant. So I approached him and he said he did have a large project and it's on the Valley and Ridge province in the southern Appalachians. You can see the red dot on the right-hand side. That's on the East Tennessee of the Valley and Ridge province. And he has this project on the Sevier Shale Basin. It's of middle Ordovician in age and it has a very complex geologic history because of its location. He wanted to study the sedimentology, stratigraphy, and tectonics. It has over 2,500 meters of shale. Unlike sandstone and limestone rocks, shale is kind of a bunch of rubbles. You can't just go and see and study rocks. So nobody wanted to study these rocks, very challenging rocks. But it contains a major clue on the origin of this middle Ordovician sequence. So he told me point blank that if you take up this project, chances of failure is great because of all these complications. But if you find something, it'll be very revolutionary. It will help not only local geology, but international geology. But if I fail, my option is I have to pack my bag and go back to India. So it was a very high-risk project for me. Finally, I decided to take up on this project and work on it. This is one of the examples of the outcrops. As you can see on the upper diagram, most of it is a bunch of rubble. There is one bed that's shown by that yellow arrow. It's a limestone. When you look at it, it's very discouraging. There is nothing to see there, just one bed. So I took a large piece of it, brought it to the lab and slabbed it. That's what you see on the lower diagram. In the slabbed surface, you can see all kind of details like the floating clast, planar fabric, meaning the long axes are aligned parallel to bedding surface, inverse grading. These things you don't see just looking at the surface. So I translated all that into physics in terms of fluid dynamics. What conditions deposit those features? I came up with the idea it's a laminar flow, and I interpreted that as a debris flow. Then I went one step forward, saying that these debris flows are moving down slope. So starting from a little bed, I'm going a gradual increment in thinking, coming up with the environment of deposition as a slope. So I went to my advisor and told him this interpretation. He said it's a very good interpretation. Then I wanted to make sure outside experts agree with my interpretation. So I wrote a paper, submitted to the Journal of Sedimentary Petrology. And they sent it out for reviews, and they came back and they said it's good, and they published it. So I was still a student. I already got a paper published, and it was getting international attention and so on. That gave me the encouragement and the confidence to move forward. The next thing is I developed a model. You see on the lower part of the diagram, you have the western slope. That's where all these debris flows are depositing. While I was doing it, they were drilling the Deep Sea Drilling Project, DSDP, Site 262. That's off Timor near Australia. They were drilling it, and when they published the results, those results were almost analogous to what I see in East Tennessee. My rocks are about 450 million years old, whereas this site's just a few million years old rocks. So that gave me the idea maybe the Sevier Basin formed in a very similar way how the modern day Timor Basin is forming today of Australia. So I came up with other deposits like debris, turbidites, contourites, soft sediment deformation, manganese distribution, subsidence on a regional scale, all this. So by the time I finished my PhD, I published 7 major articles, peer-reviewed articles. So I was getting international attention because of these publications. So if you go to the Google AI overview, it tells how I compared the Sevier Basin to the 4D Basin in Australia. So my philosophy of research is this: if there is an orthodoxy or a dogma, the whole world is going toward right, I want to find out why. So I go to the root cause of this particular dogma, find out whether it is meaningful or not. If it is not meaningful, I publish, point out this is wrong. The way I do it is not only look at the root cause of the problem, I also look at it on a global scale, not just in one area. For example, I was studying in East Tennessee. I was comparing with Australia, Timor Basin, all across the world. So when I find out something, I write a paper and publish it. My paper titles are always controversial. For example, there is a paper called 10 Turbidite Myths, the tsunami problem, the landslide problem. So people immediately pay attention to, when I publish a paper, what's in it. The other thing I use routinely is the conceptual framework of Thomas Kuhn. He was a physicist, and he came up with the stages of scientific development. When you take a topic, we first look at make random observations. Then we develop the first paradigm for that topic. Then we find out there are problems with it. So we go into a crisis mode. Then we try to fix the crisis through the revolution stage. Once all the problems are fixed, we have a normal science. This is how science works. So I follow this concept throughout my career in all my scientific publications.
Your acknowledgments mention mentors from your time at university. How did these early influences in the 1960s inspire your career in geology and sedimentology?
In doing that, I would like to give you a brief background about my origin. I was born in the southeastern coast of India, a town called Sirgari in 1944. At that time, India was under British occupation. The entire southern region was called Madras Presidency. About 120 miles north of my town, there is a town called Vellore. It's a medical town. That's where, in 1939, Will Happer was born. My life, at that time, my parents were poor and they were uneducated. But they have big worry, that is, I have 3 younger sisters. You have to pay dowry for their marriage. Anyway, that's the reason I went to college. You can see on the right-hand side, Annamalai University. And that's where I did my bachelor degree in geology and chemistry. One thing happened that time. I was an average student, but I was suffering from chronic asthma. I could not lie down and sleep like a normal person. I'll be gasping for air. The only way I can breathe is sit up straight. So I'll be sitting all night long just to breathe. And in those days, I'm talking about in the 1960s, early 60s, in my house there was no electricity, no radio, no cell phone, no TV. What do? You just sit and sit. And one day the thought occurred to me, maybe I should study. So I started studying geology. It was very quiet all night long. I was absorbing everything. The next thing happened was I was in the top of the class. And so I passed the exam. I received GPA 4.0 and I got a degree and I got a job. The job is a science teacher in a local school, just 10 minutes from my home. I'll go in the morning, give you a 1-hour lecture in science, come back, have a nice lunch my mother would make, take a nap, and then go back in the afternoon, give a 1-hour lecture in mathematics. It was a very happy life. My mother was happy, and she was already looking for a girl for me to get married. So we were one happy little family, like the Waltons, the TV series, like in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So at that time, the whole thing came to a stop because we got a postcard from this professor, T.N. Muthuswamy Iyer, the photograph in the middle. It said, "Come see me." And in those days, he was the head of the department. Head of the department means God. You don't just go and see God. Anyway, I was very nervous. I went and saw him. He said, "What's your plan for the future?" I said, "I got a teaching job. I am settled." He said, "No, you are not settled. You are top of the class in geology. So I'm going to go to IIT Bombay, which is on the other side of the country. You're going to study applied geology, MSc. It's a 3-year course in the civil engineering department." I didn't even know what IIT was. It stands for Indian Institute of Technology, one of the top institutions in the country. And I said, there is no way my parents would let me go there. We don't have the money. He said, "Take a loan, do something. I don't want to waste your life teaching science in your local town." He was very strong, and so I followed his advice. I took a loan. I also got scholarship. I was the top student. They gave me a medal. In IIT, after you pass, the next destination is study in an American university. So I applied to American universities. I got admission to Ohio University for my master's degree. So at IIT Bombay, my thesis advisor was Professor Parthasarathi. He has his DIC from Imperial College London. He has PhD from London University. He was a very highly mathematics, physics oriented person. And his main thing is engineering geology. He took me under his guidance. I did my master's degree under him. When you were at IIT Bombay, this is what happened. I had to take courses in engineering geology, soil mechanics, petroleum engineering, Russian language. That's because that institute was funded by Soviet Union. Landslides, field work. We have monsoon rains every year. There'll be major landslides. So I would go and measure engineering properties and so on. And I worked with ONGC, that is Oil and Natural Gas Corporation. It's a government company in the Rann of Kutch. That's one of the large desert areas in India. And I also worked in the lab and so on. So I was very well versed in a lot of the theoretical aspects as well as in the field aspects. So that motivated me to pursue PhD in the USA.
You worked at Mobil Oil Company, now ExxonMobil, from 1978 to 2000. How did your experience in the petroleum industry inform your views on fossil fuels and energy policy today?
Okay. This is a major turning point as far as I am concerned in terms of my contribution and research. To give you some background, Mobil Research was the second largest in the world at the time, next to Exxon. And they hired people only from Stanford, Caltech, MIT, Columbia, Princeton. They don't go to University of Tennessee. But the head of the department at University of Tennessee, where I was doing my PhD, his name is Garrett Briggs. He wanted me to have a good job because he thought I was a good geologist. So he talked to the management at Mobil Research, convinced them that they have to give me an interview. That's how I got the interview. Otherwise, I would have never gotten the interview from Mobil Research. When I went and interviewed, I was pretty much completed. I have published several papers. I have all the ducks in a row, so I gave a very good talk. They were all very impressed. They immediately offered me a job. To give you an idea, the difference between a teaching job and this job. When I interviewed, I had a job offer from McGill University in Montreal, Canada, a teaching position. My wife was reading French to getting learned and so on. So at that time, I got this job offer from Mobil. It offered me $24,000, 100% more than what the university offered. It took me 2 seconds to decide. So I joined the Mobil company. The figure on the top is the first building I worked on. And from there, I flew to Australia, New Zealand, and so on. I'll give you a case study what happened there. Then, because Mobil was the second largest company, they wanted to improve the research department. They went and hired this I.M. Pei. He was the one who designed the building in the middle for Mobil Research. That's where I spent most of my professional career. When you walk into the building, it'll be more like a museum than a research laboratory. I studied North Sea, Norwegian Sea, Nigeria, and so on. Then I moved to this building at the bottom, that's the research lab from where I studied southeastern France, Ecuador, Gabon, and so on. I retired in 2000. The same year, Mobil merged with Exxon, and it has become ExxonMobil today. I'd like to give you one example of a research project I did in southeastern Australia. As I said in the beginning, I always test the orthodoxy or the dogma. The orthodoxy is the Humi coal cannot generate oil. If you want oil, you need marine organic source rocks. Coal cannot generate oil. That was the theme at those days. So I went to Australia. The reason I went to this basin, it has got 3 billion barrels of oil. But there are no marine source rocks. So where the oil came from, it was a big puzzle. So that's the reason I went. So when you go there, you see this in the Australian basin, Latrobe Coal Valley. This one coal seam is 165 meters from top to bottom, one of the thickest in the world. When you dig into the coal, you see these resin balls you see at the bottom. These resin balls coming from a tree called kauri tree. I'll talk about that. Then this is where I got interested in the paleoclimate. I wanted to know under what condition these trees grew and what climate condition that favored these trees that generated this kind of resin and so on. When you study the paleoclimate of that time, it meets with the modern day northern New Zealand. That's very similar to Australian coal beds formation time. So I went to New Zealand. This is what you see. You see this tree called Agathis australis. Local name is kauri. It's a Maori term. So I studied these trees grow very tall, very big, and they live for 2,000 years. They have been living since Jurassic. And if you look at the lower left, there are some fruits and flowers and so on. So I went there. Next one. You see on the upper there are leaves and stuff. These trees are too tall to climb. So we use shotguns to shoot the stems of a tree limb, and then these things fall off. I brought them home and I studied under the SCM. You can see at the bottom, there is a thick cuticle. It says the arrow. That means it's a waxy coating protecting the leaf. And that's what provides the waxy oil for the basin. So putting all this together, I plotted the pristine versus phytane. These are the compounds you see in the petroleum. If you take the oil from the Gippsland oil, that's the green dot. You can see it on the upper left. And then all the red dots are the coal extracts. We use a laboratory mechanism. All these fall in the same area as the Gippsland oil, meaning that the coal is generating the oil that we see. Then I proposed this model. Now I am combining the coal geology, the plant botany, oil geochemistry, and paleoclimate. When you put all this together, there is a very coherent theme emerges. So that's why when I published this paper in 1985 in the AAPG Bulletin, even today, it is the second most cited article of all the papers I published. The first paper is, of course, I wrote on turbidites in the year 2000. So the point of all this, good science stands the test of time. This is one of the top articles I published and is still going strong after 40 years. So because of all this, I have been publishing steadily. I have published over 400 research works, of which 5 of them are Elsevier books. 2 of them have been translated into Chinese. The most recent one is the one Angela mentioned. It has got 540 case studies from all over the world. Because of all this, oil companies all over the world invite me to come and conduct deep water workshops. This one I conducted for the PetroChina. I'm standing there in the middle. Next to me, Dr. Kaining Zhou, he was the Vice President of Research. This is the China University of Petroleum in Qingdao. I'm sitting there in the middle. This is, I have been invited to give keynote lectures from all kinds of geological societies. I have given so far 93. This is the one, Geological Society of London. It was established in 1807. This is the world's oldest geological society. They invited me twice, one in 91, one in 94. I serve on the editorial board of 3 major journals. The first one is the Associate Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Paleogeography. It's a Elsevier journal. Associate Editor, Journal of Indian Association of Sedimentologists. Then editorial board member of the Petroleum Exploration and Development. What happened was
In part 2 of our interview with Dr. Shanmugam, we will learn more about how his experience in scientific investigation led him to be critical of climate alarmism.
Thank you for watching. The Climate Debrief podcast is funded by listeners like you. If you enjoyed listening to this episode of Climate Debrief, please like, comment, and subscribe. We read all of your feedback. If you are interested in finding out more about the CO2 Coalition and its mission, visit our website at co2coalition.org. Our host and executive producer is Angela Wheeler. Production by Ethan Audie and Scott Wheeler. Technical production and editing by Joseph von Spakovsky.